Hey, welcome to Tact Chat Episode 2. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Dan. Today I want to talk about anarchy, what it is and what it is not. Be right back. Okay, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and jump right into today's Tact Chat. And this is Episode 2. Host Dan, as I said, we're going to be talking about what is real anarchy. So when I used to think about anarchy or to hear the word anarchy, the first thing that would, of course, come to my mind, because I was socially engineered just like the rest of us, to think that anarchy meant, lawlessness or no rules. And the kind of movies that would come to mind would be like The Book of Eli or Mad Max, some post-apocalyptic uh, some post-apocalyptic environment where it was every person for themselves, and nothing could be further from the truth. The bottom line is you have to know where the words come from. Everybody probably knows what a monarchy means or has heard of a monarchy, right? A monarchy comes from the Greek word or prefix monos, meaning one or only one ruler. And most of the governments of our world, theocracies, republics, democracies, socialism, communism, all the other isms, started off with a monarchy. One person who thought that they were, given rights by God that the rest of us don't have. So monarchy means one ruler. We're going to get more into what that is, but unfortunately, I've come to realize there's only two types of people on this planet, and the ego can't handle this because it's a way out. But you're either a statist or you're an anarchist. And I'll explain. Statism is the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, imprison, harass, steal from, and kill people so that we can be protected from people who kidnap, harass, steal, and kill people. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And Jesus was an anarchist. Most of the Bible Belt now are statists. If you think about, and even anyone who believes in any kind of government is a statist. Governments are formed and they're given rights. It's in our Constitution. They govern through the consent of the governed in our Declaration of Independence, and we want to stop some of this nonsense we're seeing. I won't vote. I'm not going to vote. Rock the don't vote. I've had people say, and I might have said this in my last episode, but they say, well, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. And I'm like, no, bullshit. I have a right to complain, and I'm not going to vote. I don't want to take part in the system. I don't have a right to choose who's going to be your leader, who's going to be our slave master. And this is still the freest, best country in the world. Don't get me wrong, but it still boils down to if you're 90% free, you're still 10% a slave. My home's paid off. Or I should say my wife's home's paid off. I'm in my basement, not my mom's. But if I didn't pay taxes on this property, they'd come take the home. So is it really paid off? It's stuff like that. It's ridiculousness. So a statist is an individual who erroneously believes that there is a such thing as authority vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority means that certain people who will call government have the moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction. And their subjects, slaves, have a moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates or laws set by their masters. Most simply put, a statist is someone who believes in the legitimacy of slavery. So if you think about it, there's a lot of rules and laws that man has made throughout history, and I'll get into more of that later, but one minute it's something that's moral and it's legal, and the next minute it's not. Those are the type of differences between man's law and God's natural law.
You lie and kill in the service of liars and killers. You pretend to be separate, to have your own code, something that makes up for the horrors. But they are part of you.
Yeah, I'm a comic book geek. I thought that kind of fit in there kind of well. I'm a comic book geek. But conversely, an anarchist is one who knows that there could never be legitimacy to authority or government because those terms are simply euphemisms for violence and slavery, which are always immoral and in opposition to natural law. And this slide right here, an anarchist or anarchrist, I'm probably going to get some stuff from because it's I probably got some friends that might not be happy about that, but I don't care. Christ wasn't an anarchist. Christ was teaching natural law. Christ understood that we were to follow God's law. That's why he said, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and give unto God that which is already his, which is us. And I'm no biblical expert, but I've read this is right here speaks for itself. I've read contradicting passages from both the Quran and the Bible, and contradicting interpretations of those same passages at times. And until people within their religions develop a spiritual practice with a willingness to be wrong in some way, this will never change. See, we got to be willing to be wrong. There's a lot of overlapping things. Now, in the martial arts, they got all these different martial arts, right? And I'm going to go back and use these types of analogies because I've done that my whole life. Not that good at it, but I've done it. So you've got all these different types of martial arts, and you got all these overlapping philosophies and theories in martial arts, but you got people always talking about which one's better and which one's better, and they're always trying to compare the differences, yet it's within the similarities that you'll find truth in self-defense or in physical movement or in martial arts. So it's the similarities that you draw the strength from, and if you look at the similarities within any theory of creation and their intelligent design, and we were created, there's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But we can't all be exactly right, on who the main Messiah or prophet was. And we got to quit killing each other over our version. So anarchy. Anarchy comes from the Greek prefix an, meaning without or absence of. And the Greek noun archon, meaning no master or no ruler. So anarchy does not mean without rules. It literally means without rulers. And archon, no rulers, no masters and no slaves. That's literally the literal meaning of anarchy. And I had a friend recently say, well, after I gave him the literal meaning of it, he's like, well, if there was anarchy in place, there'd be nothing to keep me from going and shooting somebody in the head and getting away with it. And I was like, no, yeah, there would be, because there'd be a bunch of people that would not put up with that, because you're not supposed to bring harm to others under natural law. We have a right to self-defense, but there's also the non-aggression principle, which says you don't aggress on somebody. So if you're going to do that, you're hurting somebody, everyone else is going to get together and stop you. We don't have to have some special authority to defend people who are defenseless, or to take a criminal who's murdered somebody and get you out of the village, so to speak. So I was really astounded that he thought we needed to be governed. Like, if we don't trust ourselves to govern ourselves, why are we going to trust other human beings with all the same fallibilities we have? And power corrupts to govern us. No rulers, no masters. Anarchy is a state of existence where there are no masters and no slaves. Therefore, anarchy means the absence of slavery. In other words, freedom. That's true freedom. And some people are afraid that if we had an anarchical type of society, that there would be chaos. I don't think there would be. I don't think there would be. How are we doing so far in the world? Think about it. We've never had an anarchist society that I can recall. Now, if there is one, I'm sure I'll find out and I'll research it. But I've never heard of one. Theocracies and republics and democracies and communism, sure, all that stuff, right? How's all that working out so far for us? Think about it. No rulers, no masters. That's all anarchy means. It does not mean wild rulelessness, no lawlessness, no rules. There is rules and there is laws, natural law. So we talked about what anarchy was. So now we're going to do a little bit real quick because this isn't going to be a long presentation, but I want to talk about what anarchy isn't through apophasis or apophatic inquiry, which is affirmation through negation. We're going to talk about what anarchy is not. And this is important because we need to know what anarchy is not, even more so than what I just told you it was, because it's been drilled into our heads for so many years. And make no mistake about it, if people can use passages from the Quran and from the Bible and from the Torah, okay, from holy scriptures, if they can twist those passages to give them some type of legitimacy to murder and kill people throughout history, I know for a fact there's going to be people that'll use what they think anarchy means as some type of an excuse to go out and do stupid stuff, to go out and be violent, or go, and that's not what real anarchists are about. I went to an event and I really wasn't surprised, and I'll talk about that, but it was very refreshing. It was very refreshing to know that thought patterns and hypotheses that I was forming myself were right, basically, which is good. So anarchy is not chaos. Anarchy is not evil chaos. Now, chaos is a possibility that needs to be embraced, though, in order to have true freedom. It is through adherence to natural law in which chaos is avoided. Anarchy means no masters. It does not mean no laws or no rules. So this picture here of this riot that took place and this fire and what looks like the quintessential anarchy, it isn't. That's happening in democracies all over the world. That's happening. It happens in our own country quite often, and we do have the best country in the world. It's happening in China right now. So it's just something to think about. Just something to think about. So real quick, we're going to talk about moral relativism. Moral relativism may be any of several philosophical positions concerned with the differences in moral judgments across different people and cultures. So I don't have to read the rest of that. Now, at one point in time, I was guilty of saying, well, morals are relative, depending on what time frame in history and what culture they came from, and da-da-da-da. And I was escient in that. I wasn't ignorant. If I said that now, I'd be ignorant. It'd be more accurate to say that accepted or commonly accepted behavior and morals differed from time frame to time frame, from culture to culture. Accepted. That doesn't mean they were actually moral. 10,000 years ago, slavery was not moral. 150 years ago, slavery was not moral, but it was legal. So was it moral at that time? No. Okay, there's people right now still doing time in prison because they smoked pot or they were dealing pot. Yet pharmaceutical companies have one of the biggest opioid crises ever going on, and people dying left and right. And I live in Ohio, and it's bad in this state, real bad. And heroin's bad. People get hooked on heroin because of the opioids. It goes back and forth. But again, whatever someone ingests themselves, they're not hurting nobody else. And you got people in prison for smoking marijuana. I never messed with them guys because I was a pothead for about a year and a half as a teenager, and so was every other law enforcement person or military person you ever seen. Trust me, if you took I know they say not to trust somebody when they say, trust me, but that's just something I say sometimes. I know if you take a lie detector test and they ask you, have you ever smoked marijuana, and you say no because you're trying to be Mr. Boy Scout, they're gonna know you're lying. 99% of the people in this world have smoked pot at one time. I did it after I retired once. I didn't like it. That doesn't mean I didn't do it a lot when I was a teenager for about a year and a half or so. I never got into a fight with somebody smoking pot. The only danger I was in was maybe losing a philosophical debate if they were, educated. Maybe not getting my fair share of the Doritos or something, but I never had to fight one. I fought a lot of drunks though, So you decide which is worse for you. So what is a right? It is any action initiated that does not bring harm to another sentient being. That's it. It's a verb. It's an action. Anything you do that does not bring harm to somebody else is your right to do under natural law. You know, a right, it's correct and based in truth. A wrong is incorrect and not based in truth. A right is moral and in harmony with natural law. A wrong is immoral and in opposition to natural law. Actions based in a right do not result in the harm of other sentient beings, including animals. I'll get into that in a little bit. And in a wrong, the actions based in a wrong do result in harm to other sentient beings. I can't make it any clearer than that. You know, that's what your rights are. That's the difference between right or wrong. That's what's moral and immoral, period. Period. When I'm looking at some of the things I see the right and left arguing about, you know, gun control, you know, self-defense, guns, our First Amendment rights to do what I'm doing right now, abortion, I've changed my mind on that since I was younger. Not allowing refugees in, not helping other human beings, you know, laughing and making light of a father and daughter found dead in a river trying to get in our country. It's not about left or right. It's about right or wrong. It's that simple. We need to start thinking like that and quit being political. So, real quick, what Anarchy Isn't by Larkin Rose. I went to an event not that long ago, and this is when we see what an older anarchy guy looks like, because I'm very nearsighted. So, is that what it's called? Nearsighted, I believe. So I got this book that was really cool, and it's called What Anarchy Isn't. Okay, and I got it at this event a few months back, and it's written by Larkin Rose. And I'm going to just read this real quick. It's only about 33 pages. I may not read the whole thing, but I'm going to read part of it because there was some good stuff in this. Okay, it was just something free they gave away, so I'm sure he won't mind me reading it. So if you pay attention to mainstream media, Hollywood movies, or the usual political pundits, then hearing the word anarchist probably makes you think of a gang of mask-wearing, bomb-throwing punks, angry, violent vandals, doing whatever they can to destroy civilized society. And these days, those who wield political power are going to great lengths making up stories, instigating conflicts, etc., to demonize and mischaracterize what anarchism really means. The purpose of this little book is to counter the spin on those misconceptions. Regardless of your age, education level, income level, or views on culture or religion, don't be too surprised if after learning what anarchy actually means, you end up thinking, wait, that's exactly what I want. We're not going to get it overnight. Yeah, you know, we're not going to get this utopian anarchist world overnight, but do the least amount of harm and do as much as we can to educate people on what natural law is and on what real true anarchy is. Okay, so many people, when they hear the word anarchy, think of chaos and mayhem. They therefore assume that anyone who calls himself an anarchist must be in favor of disorder and violence, but that is the complete opposite of the truth. Just as the word monarchy means ruled by one person, the word anarchy literally just means ruled by no one. But even that, the idea of having a society without government makes some people imagine a primitive, savage type of existence full of violent conflict without compassion or organization. But that too is a completely inaccurate picture of what anarchism means. In fact, most complaints about anarchism are the result of people misunderstanding what the philosophy is all about. Most people are scared of anarchy, are scared of things that anarchists don't want. And I've seen this for myself. And they don't advocate. I've seen that for myself also. To help correct such misunderstandings, we will use the example of two fictional islands, Authoritania, where there is a ruling class of government, and Anarchia, where there is no ruling class of any kind. These will be used to illustrate what anarchy actually means and what it does not mean. And just to kind of show the illustrations, I think that's kind of, it's cool. It's made for anybody to read. The 12-year-old could probably read it better than me, actually. Okay, so one common misconception about anarchy is that it must mean every man for himself and survival of the fittest, where everyone has to be selfish and self-sufficient, where there is little to no cooperation or organization, or where people all behave like greedy, violent animals. This comes from the false assumption that there can be no order or structure to society without government, and that without some sort of governing political body or some controlling authority, people could not and would not find ways to get along and cooperate and organize for mutual benefit. But in reality, government is never about true cooperation. Whether it is a republic, democracy, dictatorship, or some other form of government, always constitutes a ruling class that gives commands called laws and uses force to punish anyone who disobeys. That is not cooperation, that is domination. It is one group forcing its will on everyone else and making them obey. And getting away from this, I think on a personal level, that's where my disconnect started to happen. When you know something just isn't right and you can't quite put your finger on it. Government forces people to fund its ideas by way of taxation and forces people to cooperate with its plans by way of regulation and legislation. Ultimately, both are enforced by men with guns. In contrast, true cooperation is about people voluntarily working together of their own free will without anyone else forcing them to. And people already do this in thousands of different ways every day without politicians or law enforcers making it happen. So no, obviously cooperation does not require the existence of political power. Again, the company that I work for, privately owned company, we knew who the owners were. Okay, they footed the bill for a lot of the stuff. They were the owners. They paid us not a lot of money, but everyone's there because we wanted to be there. And no one was issuing orders or dictating anything. And these are, you know, some prior military and some prior law enforcement and some people that are just, you know, NRA or whatever. And there was no feelings that you were being told what to do. Everybody wanted to be there. So the cooperation was amazing. It still is. So, all right. Okay, so where I was at, does not require the existence of political. Okay. So, and while it's true that authoritarianism and government power can be used to force people into various forms of organization, that does not mean that people are incapable of organizing without being forced, which they obviously already do in many different ways. In fact, the most productive examples of organizations are already anarchist in nature. Consider, for example, your favorite grocery store. Everyone involved in the hugely complex operation of growing, processing, and transporting, displaying, and selling food participates voluntarily. Customers choose where they want to shop, what they want to buy, and all the other people involved, truck drivers, checkout clerks, stock boys, administrators, etc., do things in exchange for getting paid. This is purely voluntary arrangement allows for an amazing, complex example of organization and cooperation without anyone being forced to participate. This is literally anarchy in action. And that's why I keep giving, the self-defense, firearm company that I was, working with. I keep giving that same example, and I'm not going to name the company until they say, hey, you can. But it was ran the same way. I mean, it was awesome, especially coming from the hierarchical, backstabbing environment that I came from. So in contrast, whenever government does something, a very small group of people, politicians, comes up with an idea that forces everyone else to go along with it. In this authoritarian version of a supermarket, the ruling class will tell people what to produce and how much, and tell customers what they must buy and how much they must pay for it. Anyone who does not comply will be punished in some way. This is how government always does things. Some anarchists prefer the term volunteerists. I kind of like that, volunteerists. Because the philosophy is based on the idea that all human behavior should be based upon voluntary interaction and not force or coercion. Another common but incorrect assumption is that if there were no government, people would have no way to defend themselves against criminals or foreign invaders, but one does not need a badge or special authority to have the right to defend himself or others against attackers and thieves. Everyone already has a right to use defensive force on his own or together with others for mutual protection. Anarchy means no one has the right to rule. No one has any special rights. It does not mean that people can't get together and exercise rights that everyone already has. In a stateless society, even professional protectors would only have the same rights as everyone else. We wouldn't have people in Congress for life not really getting anything done, right? So another concern that some people have is that if there were no government, then smaller private gangs would spring up and rob and oppress and enslave people. There are a couple of reasons why this fear is misguided. First of all, even private street gangs and organized crime today exists mainly because of government, not in spite of it. Almost all private gangs get their funding from dealing in black markets, drugs, gambling, illegal immigration, guns, prostitution, etc., which are very lucrative as well as very dangerous because of government laws. In a free society, thugs and thieves as individuals or in gangs wouldn't have any black markets to take over. But more importantly, people who fear that without government, warlords would take over are ignoring how much people's perceptions matter. A criminal gang which everyone recognizes as illegitimate and immoral has far less power than a gang whose aggression is perceived as legitimate and legal. Its commands and demands being called laws and taxes, and anyone who disobeys seen as criminals. In other words, a population is far more likely to be oppressed by a gang which the people themselves imagine have the right to rule than some gang that everyone knows is bad. You know, we know gangs are bad. And everyone would feel perfectly justified in disobeying and resisting, even forcibly. Imagine a private gang trying to do what the government does, extorting and bossing everyone around, but imagine if they tried to do it without any aura of legal authority. Then imagine how a well-armed population would respond. The gang would fail quickly and dramatically, and all those who resisted them would be viewed as righteous heroes. But when the people feel morally obligated to obey the politicians' laws, any who resist are viewed as criminals or tax cheats. Even by their own friends and neighbors, most people see government domination as necessary and valid, so they cooperate with their own victimization. This is why government gets away with far more oppression and extortion than private gangs ever could, because most of the victims of legal thuggery and theft see it as necessary and legitimate. Millions of people tolerate the confiscation of huge portions of their earnings to tolerate having many of their choices and behaviors forcibly limited and controlled by way of legislation, as long as people given the orders are seen as legitimate political authority. And this is just historical. This isn't just today. But it just goes to show you, if you don't know your history, you can't possibly know what could happen in the future. You know, during Prohibition, alcohol was illegal. So was it immoral? You know, before Prohibition and since Prohibition, it's completely legal. So does that mean it's moral now? And it's the same thing with drugs. You know, it's the same thing with consensual sex between adults. It's the same thing with a lot of things. If it's not hurting anybody, it's moral. That's me talking. That's not on this. Okay, so the presence of government drastically increases the chances of people getting robbed, increases the chances to 100%, in fact, since every government taxes the people and pretends to represent. Meanwhile, and pretends to represent. When I listen to my friends argue over who's going to do what with their money, they're arguing over who's going to do what with their money. And if you're super poor, I mean, I've been like the working poor, blue collar my whole life. I've never been richer or poorer or in worse shape or good shape or anything because of who's in office. So I've been pretty neutral about what my politics are, which makes me pretty escient when I decide to take a stance on something, and then all of a sudden I'm being bounced on. I'm being attacked by some political friends of mine, and I didn't even know it was a political thing. You know, I don't make my decisions based on that. All right, to put it another way, warlords already did take over and called themselves government and convinced their victims that it was righteous and necessary for the warlords to dominate, control, and exploit everyone else for their own good. Stockholm Syndrome, anybody? I talked about that in my last one. Look it up. Relying on government to prevent theft and oppression is completely ridiculous, since government is the biggest thug and thief there is, confiscating far more wealth than all the other crooks and criminals combined. So any government protection is always totally hypocritical. Government law enforcers may sometimes find and lock up some private thugs and thieves, and I did. You know, they were breaking natural law also. And I still think police are needed. Don't get, and we're not going to automatically turn it into some awesome, you know, utopian society. But there needs to be some changes all around, top to bottom, bottom to top. Okay, so as patently absurd as that is, most people still accept it without question. When someone first considers the idea of a stateless society, he may also worry that people who are truly malicious, destructive, and sociopathic, and there are such people in the world, yeah, I worked in a prison, that they would now be free to do anything they pleased with no one to stop them. But this concern is again based on a basic misunderstanding of human nature. People who are willing to victimize others by their very nature don't care about morality. They don't care about the police. If they did, there wouldn't be crime. They don't care about the consequences, because if they did, there wouldn't be any rape or murder. They do what they do because they're sociopathic psychopaths. So they don't care what they are doing is right, and they also don't care if what they are doing is legal. They care only whether they can get away with harming others. In some instances, a would-be crook or thug might be deterred or stopped by force or by the threat of force, whether by someone with a badge or by someone without one. What makes this deterrence work, however, is not the legislation or the official badges, but the simple threat of harm. I forgot who said this. He was Lieutenant Colonel Grossman said this, I believe. Lieutenant Colonel Grossman wrote a book called On Killing, and it talks about, if you haven't read it, and I read part of it, and it could come across as a dry read, unless you're, really studying the psychology of how they try to prepare you to be able to, kill. And he talked about that the criminal must be taught to fear their victims, because they don't fear punishment, and they don't fear the police, and they don't fear going to jail. They must be taught to fear their victims if crime is to be alleviated in that way. Which is why any state, 20 years ago, certain states had, you were able to conceal carry. Those states generally had less violent crimes, and that's a statistical fact. So, okay, so yeah, and it is, and that is true regardless of whether government exists or not. It makes no difference to the crook whether the threat comes from the police or another citizen or even another criminal. Discouraging nasty people from hurting others does not require special authority, only the ability and willingness to use defensive force. And there is a difference between the use of force and violence. I was a use of force instructor. If the intended target of the would-be carjacker pulls out a gun, and it doesn't make any difference to the carjacker whether that person has a badge or whether there's a law against taking people's cars. Without a ruling class, decent people would still have every incentive, ability, and right to organize and cooperate to defend against thugs and thieves, and they wouldn't need any badge or official title legislation or special right to do so. And as with any service, people can hire others to help with protection. Every person doesn't have to do it himself. I mean, even now they've got, private police out there that are doing it. It's a dangerous job, and there's a reason why there's so many suicides in it. You usually end up at great war with yourself besides everything else you're dealing with. Now, some people might assume that if people organize for mutual protection and defense, that is government, but that is not at all the case. Political authority is not about people coming together to doing something that everyone already has a right to do. Political authority is about one group of people claiming the right to do things that normal people do not have the right to do, such as taxing and controlling everyone else. Organized defense can be both effective and legitimate without anyone claiming to have any right to rule. And a group that protects against aggressors while having no special authority is not government. And believe me, low-level order followers, they're not government, because they eat us real quick. And I'm saying us because I used to be one. They feed on their own fast, especially if you're low level. Even when there is government, there are still freelance thieves and thugs who are not deterred by the law or by the laws of the politicians anyway. I might not have to read this whole thing. I think you're starting to get the point. The point is there wouldn't be this recklessness. There wouldn't be anarchy. Is not about no laws or no rules. These people out here are doing this stuff. People that are breaking the natural laws, the 7 transgressions against natural law: murder, rape, assault, theft, trespass, coercion, lying. Those people do that and they don't care about the laws anyway. It's common sense to me. So, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but these are out there. And it's just something to try to educate yourself on a little bit. And no anarchist that I've been to, and I just went to an event, and nobody is calling for, I can take these things off now. Nobody is calling for, overthrowing the government and or using force. There was none of that. There was none of that. So I can tell any LEO people that watch this stuff, that are on the lookout for this stuff, true anarchists are not talking about overthrowing the government. Everyone understands that you have to change people's minds to fix the problem. Because throughout history, they got this saying that, violence never solved anything. And I would politely disagree, because violence has overthrown every evil dictator, Adolf Hitler. Every dictator throughout history has been overthrown with the use of force, otherwise known as violence. I think it'd be a more accurate statement to say that violence usually begets more violence, and that's not what anybody wants. And I didn't hear that not one time in this group of people at this event that I went to. And if this is what the anarchist movement's about, then it's not a bad movement. And they're not some type of domestic threat. They're trying to educate people on a different way of living without the nonsense and hypocrisy that we've got now. And everyone's been a hypocrite at one point in time, myself included. I'm going to put all that in my next book. I wrote a book called Violence and Ego, and I'll get into that, but I've never marketed it well. I'm writing my next book. I'm going to try to market that one a little better because I realize even though I need spiritual currency, more importantly than human currency, it's the human currency that I have to work with right now. I can't give it if I don't have it. So I'm going to try to market that in the next book a little bit more, and I'm going to tell my sins. I'm going to tell my, I'm not perfect. I'm going to tell my stuff. I'm going to tell how I overcame some stuff in that book. And that brings me to the event. I don't know how much time I'm working on, but I went to this event in September called Anarchadelphia. And it was, being what I used to do for a living, I'm not going to say I wasn't a little bit nervous at first. I was definitely, a little apprehensive, and I got there a little late. I missed a day, and I got there Saturday, like right around 12 o'clock, and I got to, catch one of the educational pieces that was happening. Actually, Gina Carr, I believe was her name. Yes, Gina Carr. And she did a real excellent job on selling me on becoming a vegetarian and working towards full vegan. I haven't ate meat since then. Not only from an emotional and I think moral standpoint, but from just a scientific standpoint, the way she put it together. And I was in shock. I just haven't been able to do it since. I still have some animal byproducts that doesn't kill the animal, but I'm working on getting rid of those too. And humans aren't meant to be meat eaters. And what's her name? Her name is Gina Carr. Look her up. Look her up on YouTube, Gina Carr. Ginacarr. Look her up. And you'll probably find some of her presentations. I had never seen one of hers. I've seen some that were similar, but just seeing it in person and being there, not only seeing the presentation, but listening to her in person. You can't replace that. What you see in 3D, what you feel in 3D is definitely different than even this in 2D. Absolutely. And I think that was powerful enough for me to, become a vegetarian at least, from that point forward. And I had tried before and failed. And there were other people. There were a lot of good presenters there, really good presenters. So it was nothing on what I expected. And I didn't expect anything bad. I went there for a reason. But I kind of I let it leak out a little bit to a couple people who I was. I got some pretty cool artwork from somebody. So as I'm studied a little bit on Norse, on the Vikings and on Norse mythology, and it was customary. If somebody gave you a present, you'd give them something. So I gave him a book, and I knew as soon as he looked at the back of the book, he'd see what I used to do for a living. So now this was like the first day I was there. So now the cat was out of the bag, so to speak. And I'm sure people, found out. I never once felt in any kind of danger or anything like that. Not at all. Other than being in South Philadelphia at night going to my car. But, I'm from Cleveland, so I'm used to the city. So that wasn't too big of a deal. But what you think anarchy is You know, when anarchy comes to mind and how we've been socially engineered to believe what anarchy is, you know, this is probably what comes to mind. And I took this from actually from a video, but this is not what it was, not in the least bit. Now, there were a few people, just like I said earlier in the presentation, that are they'll use anarchy or try to use it to let out some frustration, and they're drawn to it for bad reasons, okay? And just like people will use theologies from the Bible or from the Quran to commit atrocities, there's going to be people that are going to try to use anarchy as, hey, this means no rules. That's what I've seen people say. I don't believe, I'm an anarchist, I don't believe in rules. They're not true anarchists. I've already explained that, and there's other people explaining it way better than me. True anarchists do believe in rules. So if you think this is what it is, I'm going to show you right now what it literally actually was. And by the way, I don't know if anyone from that put that on is going to see it, but going to see this. But if I had to give that a grade, I would grade it as an A. I was going to get up, and only reason it's not an A plus is I was going to read. I wanted to read something that I brought with me, and I just didn't get a chance to do the hot mic because it kind of wasn't announced or I missed it or whatever. But other than that, man, I give it an A. I was going to read that now, but I think I've gone long enough. I'm not going to read it now. Maybe I'll read it some other time. But if this is what you think it is, you're wrong. Literally, this is what it was. And I mean, there were people up there teaching holistic medicine. Okay, holistic medicine believes in preventing illness, how to holistically, naturally treat it when it does come, but preventing it. So holistic medicine, holistic, good diet. There's people giving all kinds of awesome presentations. A presentation on cryptocurrency. There's somebody doing life in prison now because of that. And I wish I should have been more prepared. I'd like to put that name out there. But this poor kid's doing life in prison for selling things online with cryptocurrency, allowing cryptocurrency to be used for what it was created for. Meanwhile, you got guys only doing 10 years who've killed somebody. They get out on good behavior. It makes no sense. None whatsoever. So, yeah, this is what it was. And literally every age, ethnicity, level of education, there were doctors there. Then there was me, the blue collar scholar, I guess you can call me, or whatever. But you had every level of person there, and there was no problems whatsoever. I mean, it was a great event, and I'm probably going to go back next year. You learn more in person. I really think you do. The Sacred Gift of Anger on Saturday evening was put on by Mark Passio. That was an excellent presentation. It's an excellent presentation, and I'll probably talk about, anger at one point or another in one of my, next, follow-up episodes, probably next year, because there's a difference between righteous anger and resentful anger you're addicted to because of the adrenaline dump. That's not a good kind of anger, and he covered that real well. I mean, he covered it beautifully. I'm probably going to talk about the differences between envy and jealousy, because there's a difference. One's darker than the other. One, you might not be lazy, and the other one, you're lazy. I'm going to talk about a bunch of that stuff. But this event was awesome, and the guys, the State of Anarchy, who put it on, were awesome. I got to talk to the main guy of State of Anarchy, Carmen, and I talked to him briefly, and he's a crazy dude. He's fought MMA, and he just lives life. You could see it in his eyes. I didn't see nothing, and no one I talked to that day, on any of those days, there was nothing but love and compassion. And the table I sat at, they all know what I did. I mean, if this is what anarchy is, and I'm really getting to see what it is, I like it a lot better than the democracy we live in. Where we're laughing about people getting, dying, trying to get into our country, a country of immigrants, right? So anyway, I've ran my mouth long enough. I'm probably going to be gone a couple months, and then I'm going to start back up probably the end of January, beginning of February, and try to start putting out more material. And I hope you like the show. If you like the show, hit the subscribe button, hit like. Go check out my Facebook page. Check out, I got a Vimeo page where I'm putting these up on also. So, there's those. So anyways, peace out. Thanks for tuning in here.